daily grind of seeing that things work, that we don't reflect enough on our history and the people who made a difference to this party. And Ashton Chase was one of those. He was there at the very beginning, even before the PPP was formed in 1950. He was part of the group that planned the formation of this party. And he's been associated with this party since then. So if tonight we are going to do something, we have to trace the evolution of contemporary history in Guyana, the political history, and the challenges to that history, not the economic history, because we can deal with that for days. But in the political history, there were some seminal things that we have had to achieve. And those were, one, freedom from that entire period. It has always been in the center of the fight for those freedoms that we currently enjoy today. I want to welcome the family, Ashton's family. Please have a seat. Yes, there are some seats in front. Please come in front. Yes, please, yes. Yeah, just sit in front there. No, yes, please. Yes, welcome. And the point I was making is that Ashton played a central role in the fight for independence, and then again in the fight for democracy, and then thereafter the fight to maintain freedom. And tonight I expect a number of people will trace in great depth the struggles that were common to all of us and the role he played in that regard. But as I said before, I want to be short too, and I've asked others to be short so as many people can speak tonight. And what I'm very proud of today, I stand here as General Secretary of a party that has remained faithful since its formation in 1950 to the ideals of its original founder, Ashton being one of them. A party that committed itself to fight for freedom for our people, a party that committed to fight to improve the lot of the working people of this country, and a party that committed itself to work for national unity, that is a multi-ethnic party. And with all the challenges we have faced from 1950 to now, if you did a forensic audit of our policies and the practices when we've been in government and out of government of this party, you will see that we've remained faithful to those ideals. And today, because of the work of Ashton and many others like him, because of they set such high standards for this party, we're the only multi-ethnic party in this country. Prove that in spite of the challenges. We've had a history where our leaders were not only jailed for what they believed in, but many gave their lives for that struggle from British colonial rule. And then in the dark period of undemocratic rule, this party was characterized in a particular way, that it's a party for Indian people only. And no matter what we tried to do, from Cde and all of our leaders, that stereotype took root in many communities in our land. And it thrived there because of the rumor mill and because of the opposition using this as a political tool. And we've fought through all sorts of policies to break that hold. And today, I'm saying more and more people are seeing the true nature of the party, not a newly acquired nature, but its nature from its foundation by leaders like Ashton Chase, that it was set up to fight for all of the people of our country, regardless of their race, religion, class, or gender. Understand this party fought for at the beginning are the things that we continue to guide us today. And the results of the last local government elections have shown that this party has that reach. So people understand this party, so a party that has been associated with progress and national unity, that party is growing stronger day by day. And it's up to the people in this room, many of you here, it's up to you to make this happen. People need to know more of the history of this party, and we need to fight aggressively to break down all the stereotypes that have been used against this party. And if we do that, then our party will continue to really appreciate you coming here to pay tribute to one of our founding members. And sometimes, as I said before, we need to do this more when people are alive, but people get caught up in the work of just trying to keep this very complex country moving forward, that we don't do enough of that. We want to thank the family, express our deepest sympathies, and thank the family for Ashton's work and for his dedication, not only to this country, but to our party. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, GS, and for the family of Ashton, welcome. We know this is not a good time, but we also wanted to surround you with the embrace of our people here, all the guests who have come, who've responded to the invitation that was public to come out, to know that you are warmly embraced by all of us and warmly embraced in Freedom House, which your Ashton knew and loved, and where many of his political challenges and career and activities took place right here, except a smaller building, but nevertheless, these are the roots were right here. And so we want to let you know this evening, and I'm sure from many of the speakers, that we appreciate the fact that you allowed a man like Ashton Chase to serve his country, to be a patriot of no mean order, of a citizen of our country who was principled and a man of integrity and a wonderful human being. And so I hope for the younger generation here tonight that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us And Ashton was one of those shoulders that we have stood on and built on to build a nation of diversity, of inclusion. And so I hope tonight that we will, as we said in the beginning when we started, this is not a formal event. The formal event will be tomorrow, and you'll have all the speakers there. And so the president will be speaking tomorrow at Parliament Buildings and other guests that will be speaking there. But tonight is a more informal, and I would like to start off because sometimes you take a little bit time to warm up and to get the courage to come to the front and to signal to me that you want to speak. We'll ask, as GS reminded you, not long speeches because we want to give as many people a chance to speak as possible. But I'd like to start with Dr. Nanda Gopal, because Ashton was the founder, another founder of the NASI, a union, and we know that the trade unions and labor movement was one of his passions. So I'd like to ask Nanda to come forward, please. Thank you.
Excellency Dr. Mohammed Irfan Ali, Prime Minister Mr. Brigadier Mark Phillips, Vice President, other members of Cabinet, senior party comrades, the family and friends of Comrade Ashton Chase. I see former Attorney General, former Chancellor of the Judiciary, and I know Ashton and I appeared before him on numerous occasions advocating for workers' rights, he and some of his other colleagues. So I welcome him, welcome everyone here this evening. I came prepared to read from two books, 700 pages tonight, but having listened to the Vice President, and I must be obedient to him because I served him for a long time, and when he says something, he means it. So I'm going to be very short. I'm not going to union law in the Caribbean, glimpses of trade unions in Guyana, and the last one was Arise Africa. Not many people know of that last title, but Arise Africa was after Comrade Chase was frustrated over the lack of progress being made and the lack of leadership being given to the African continent. And so he was motivated to write that book, calling on Africa to stand up and to be their own. They have the potential. At that time, he saw that they had the potential. Now, Comrade Ashton Chase and I went right back to 1970. So I'm doing it. I am joining the strike. And at that time, Mr. Chase learned that I was a temporary, and he said, if you are joining the strike, we'll have to defend you if they sack you. After the strike was called off, the manager then was a Scotsman named Williamson and called me in to say he wanted to see me. The entire office started to pack up their things because he felt that I was going to be dismissed. When I walked into his office, he handed me a letter and I said, thank you, I'm going. He said, no, open it. When I opened it, he was confirming me as a junior bookkeeper. He said, I'm doing that because of your principle. And keep it up, keep that principle up. I wasn't angry with anybody who went on strike. And the same month, Mr. Chase came back to the estate and I became the branch chairman. We had that relationship from then on. I became the treasurer of the union, the general secretary of the union. After that, the president of the union when he vacated. Mr. Chase became an honorary president of NACI in 1965. After he was asked by Comrade Bangari, who had just come back from a PPP scholarship in Moscow and started to serve the PPP and the NACI as general secretary. When Comrade Bangari asked him, because Comrade Bangari said the estate is giving us a hard time, he then agreed to be the honorary president and nothing else. But a year after, you found then that white-collar workers were militant. Hardly you found supervisors, field supervisors. They always tell them they're part of management. Hardly you found that they were militant. And so those people became a militant band. And throughout that period, 66 right up to 84, where 7 unions had represented the workers in small pockets. One of the ways the planters used to divide and rule: sugar boilers in one category, sick nurse and dispensers in one category, supervisors in another category, the leadership given by Mr. Chase. And the militancy of the union then brought 3 unions, 2 in merger and 1 in a takeover. The sugar boilers, the supervisors, and the sick nurses and dispensers. At that point in time, NACI became a formidable force in the industry, in that Mr. Chase used the sugar boilers as a weapon against the sugar barons. He decided to warn them. He said, if you decide not to pay what the workers want, what we consider to be fair and reasonable, we are going to bring the sugar boilers alone out on strike. And we are going to use the workers' wages to pay them to be on strike. It means you can't produce sugar. You have to pay the other workers. That was a telling blow to the planters at that time. It forced them to recruit very formidable lawyers, senior counsel, the locals, to represent their interests. Several battles ensued, and Ashton led them all during that period, including the one leading to 40-hour, 5-day work week. When we asked for the 40 hours, the industry said they are grinding a state of 7 days and they can't give, enforcing the 40-hour. And as a result, 10 workers were dismissed at Rosal Estate. Ashton fought that case again. It went to a commission of inquiry known as the Wills Commission of Inquiry, and the workers were all reinstated. In 1961, there was a commission of inquiry again as of Nasi activism, and Ashton led the union delegation at that commission in front of J.O.F. Haynes. The J.O.F. Haynes Commission of Inquiry brought out many benefits to the workers. It was followed by another J.O.F. arbitration, and that arbitration brought tremendous benefits to the workers. Incidentally, before the arbitration, the Prime Minister then, Mr. Burnham, appointed Mr. Stanley Moore to head the Commission of Inquiry and to make recommendations. We presented our case, and instead of getting more, we got less. So Ashton carved that slogan, instead of more, we got less. He sent back the report in a ribbon with a cross, put it in what is perceived to be a coffin, and said, keep your report. We then went on strike, and Mr. Justice Haynes became the arbitrator. The union got tremendous benefits. Workers were asked to sign off that they want the benefits which was recommended by Moore. They did not. They allowed Mr. Chase to do his work. At the end, the benefits were tremendous. At the same time, where the union headquarters is located at 64 High Street, Ashton heard about it, heard that Burnham was interested in buying it. It was next to what was called Stella Maris High School. He knew Dr. Bender, who was selling, went to Dr. Bender, and Bender told him, why Forbes want this thing for $72,000. He said, I'll give you $72,500. Ashton, we didn't have 1 cent in the union coffers. He signed the deal, gave him a check for the deposit. By the time the inquiry finished and the money was paid, we raised $125,000 from the workers. They gave 10% donation to the union to buy that property. We owe that property. We owe that property to vision, the tenacity to Comrade Ashton Chase. So he led the union into crane advisory arbitration, into a Desiree Bernard inquiry, where a female member of the staff at IFLOT was sexually harassed by the administrative manager there, Jerome Chan. And we nearly landed ourselves in hot water because in our quill, we said the jumping bull must go home. We were sued, but Ashton brought us out of that. Desiree Bernard was heading that commission of inquiry, and she found that he used his office for his amorous delight. In fact, when they did the inquiry, they found Guinness Stout and all sort of things in his drawer. And those came out in the inquiry. Amazing thing. The girl was the sister of Saw, this radical who was based in England. He couldn't believe that a union will fight the sister case in that manner. But these were some of the battles waged by Ashton. He became very prominent. In 1993, after free and fair elections were won, he decided to give up the presidency because he believed that a working class government being in power, knowing Cde Jagan, that there wouldn't be any need for militancy or anything of that sort. The industry had become nationalized, and Cde had started to show type of capacity to deal with workers, to give workers their fair share. So Ashton said he was going to take a sabbatical. We urged him to remain as an honorary president, and he remained an honorary president to today. But when he was leaving, he said he was leaving the union in capable hands, in that Sigobin Balram took over as president. I was already general secretary, and we started to continue the fight. We expanded the union again through Mr. Chase at Tulsi Prasad and other companies addition to that, and he did many, many more activities, led the union into several struggles. He was a human rights advocate. He became a co-president of the Human Rights Association with Bishop Randolph. And so that bar journal became a reality. And I know the chairperson, and I am going to be obedient because I am leaving the rest. I am leaving the rest and the other stories to tell you about the formidable thinker, the formidable human rights activist, the man who fought the case for Bonnie Ramsden, myself, several cases, the case Ramsden against Barker, Clive Thomas against the government then when they refused him to travel, and the case of Makepeace Richmond, who was refused advertisement in the Guyana Chronicle at that time to advertise his political meeting, winning them all, putting the government on notice that democracy, fair play, and justice will prevail. That was part of the life. The other parts are written in volumes of books. Ashton, someone who has inspired our life, we want to say, just like the People's Progressive Party leadership would have said, you have been part of this glorious country. You have been part of a glorious movement, a glorious struggle. Thank you very much.
As our General Secretary said in the beginning, that it's unfortunate that it's in these occasions that we talk about a person. We don't in our busy lives, and sometimes we feel that we don't want to, as they say in Guyana, big up anybody. So we wait until they're past, and then you hear all these wonderful stories and history. And it's unfortunate, but maybe that's how life is. But the thing is that in listening to all the speakers who are here tonight, you're going to learn about Guyana and our history, because Ashton's life and decisions was inextricably linked to our nation, our country, in the struggle against the British colonialism, the struggle for democracy, and the struggle for nation building. And he worked in many corridors, in many amphitheaters of the law, of the courts, of the trade unions, of the labor movement, of human rights. And so when I was listening to Nanda speaking, I wondered if any of you realize, because we're talking about a man who passed at 96, but do you realize that he was only 27 years old when he became a minister in the ministry, the first government and the first parliament of Guyana in 1953. He was, and this, the importance of the Political Affairs Committee in the formation of the PPP brought young people, Cde Jagan and Janet Jagan, Ashton Chase, Jocelyn Hubbard, Burnham joined eventually, and many others, that these were all young people in their 20s and 30s. And here were when the PPP was formed and fought the first elections in 1953. We won 18 of 24 seats. And Ashton was a minister, and I walked with this little book which I showed at the 70th anniversary of Parliament, which Ashton wrote, 133 Days Towards Freedom in Guyana. And its subtitle is, "This is the Communist Plot," quote unquote, a faction authoritative account of the PPP's term of office by Ashton Chase. When you read this little booklet, it's amazing what was done in that short period, because after 133 days, the British removed a democratically elected government, the first democratically elected government in Guyana, and brought in warships, arrested the leaders, and so forth. And so when we talk about many people in our country, particularly those in that older generation, they could have given up. They could have said in the 60s, when a lot of people were heading to London and to go and migrate to other countries, Ashton never did. He worked and dedicated his entire life to this country. And so we have to also recognize that that is what we want to instill in the next generation. The PPP is the oldest party in the Caribbean region. We are 73 years old, and we're in the 5th generation. The 4th generation, Irfan Ali, and the 5th generation. All those are in their 20s and 30s who are joining us at this point. And so we come from strong foundation, good roots. And because we've had such outstanding leaders as Ashton with us, who was humble, a man of integrity, principled, and fought for what he believed in. And he started from a young age, and as far as I know, Ashton never deviated until the day he died. He never deviated from what he believed in and stood for. And he's instilled that into his family, his daughter, who I know, and his children and his grandchildren, I'm sure, that this way of life, that how we treasure the one life we're given, is important. And so let me now ask, I have 2 other trade unions to come on. That is the Carvel Duncan for the GLU and also CPON, Narayan for KAU. But I want to take a little pause from the trade union, if you don't mind, and ask if there's anybody from the audience who wants to speak. You can come up for a few minutes and then I'll switch back. Anybody feels ready to speak or? Yes? Dr. Is that Randy Passon? Yes, thank you. Remember, short. Short, I'll have to keep coming closer.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, Prime Minister, Vice President, members of the Chase family, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am deeply honored to have this opportunity to address you this evening, not on my own behalf, but on behalf of my father, who was a sugar worker, a member of NACI, and I'm very proud to say a frequent letter writer in the Quill. If you don't know the Quill, it was the newspaper of NACI. And I have just 2 quick things to share with you, 2 stories. I had a sister who was born in 1973, and we couldn't get her birth certificate. And my father decided to write a letter to the Prime Minister, and the letter read something as follows. Dear Prime Minister, 1 birth certificate has taken me to Georgetown, 5 days. I've had to leave my work, and I have worked out how much 1 birth certificate has cost this government and this country, not to mention the missed production when I leave my job. If 1 birth certificate could cost X hundreds of dollars by 1973, do you think we'd be able to do even one of those things in terms of feed, clothes, and house the nation? So, very worried about this. But you know what Father said? He said, do not worry. When I go there and take this letter, I am not going alone because there is a whole union behind me. And there's a man and there's a movement. The man's name is Ashton Chase, and the movement are the sugar workers of Guyana. I was going to tell you 2 stories, but the time is short. My dad is 92. I called him and I told him that Mr. Chase passed away. And he said, I will never forgive you if you do not go there and tell the family and share with this audience how much Ashton Chase inspired his own life. Thank you all very much.
Some people may not know that in the 70s and 80s, there were lawyers who worked pro bono for those who were arrested and taken out of sight for a week or two. In fact, some people don't know, who had the majority of votes would not be in government. And a number of our leaders went to Sibley Hall. A number of our leaders were under house arrest. And that struggle for end of colonialism, and then the struggle began in 1966, May 26, with the struggle for democracy, because democracy was put under threat by the PNC government. And so many leaders were picked up in 3 and 4 in the morning, as we say in Creole, in their boxes, and taken to police stations, sometimes taking other places. There was a group called the Death Squad, who were men who were taken out of prison and given what were called knuckle breakers and wore a lot of bling bling. And they would stop men and arrest them, particularly those who were political. And so there was a group of lawyers that gave their service freely. Some of them, like Charles Ramsden, Sr., who's here, Miles Fitzpatrick, Ashton Chase, Bernard DeSantis, for example, Do Not Sing, were on call to basically help us to go to court to ask for habeas corpus. So they'd force the police to bring the men, majority men, before the court, because you couldn't find them at any police station, you don't know where they were, etc. And so these were men who gave their time. I wonder how many lawyers, maybe I'm wrong to say this, give their time pro bono now. But in those days, they gave their time pro bono, and they went to court and they fought the cases, and we won the cases, many cases. So that these are the roots and the foundation upon which the political struggle has been built on. End colonialism. And just another side thing, when the British were here in the 50s, and I'm just going back to the 40s and 50s, I'm not that old, by the way, like Ashton. I'm a little bit younger. But you know, you couldn't go into Park Hotel, or you couldn't go into places if you weren't light-skinned. Only those who were light-skinned could go in. And so you could only go in, Afro-Guyanese, we say, and Indo-Guyanese today could only have gone into those places if they were working there as the cleaners and the cooks, not as guests, not as at restaurants and anything like that. This was a country in the 50s. That's part of the struggle to end colonialism, was to end this division that occurred both on control, economic, political control, as well as the racial divide of our people. And so we've come a long way, and people like Ashton brought us and stood by us all these long, long years. And we are forever grateful for him, for what he stood for. And so I'd like to ask someone else who would like to say something, or I'll go to I know I keep my trade union people, but I can always depend on the trade union people. Okay, see, Paul, do you want to come? No, let Carlo first, sorry. Come, Carlo, come on. GLU, you can tell us how you fought against Ashton.
Actually, I want to hear that.
Yes.
Protocol is absurd. The first thing I wish to say is this, that it was the GLU that started Ashton's trade union career. That is the first union that he joined. That is the first union he was elevated to Assistant General Secretary. And that's the first union that sent him on a one-year scholarship to England. the Ruston College. But more of that I will deal with tomorrow. Now, the other thing is that my encounter with Ashton as General Secretary is one that needs to be remembered. When I met Ashton at his office, I had 10, I think it's 10 or 12 injunctions filed by the then opposition leader. And those injunctions were filed because about 3 weeks prior to that, Ashton called me and he said, Carvel, there's going to be a conference of the Federation of Independent Trade Union. Would GLU be a part of that? I said, it's a trade union organization. Why not? We'll be a part. He said, and I will put you on the program. And I went to Tower and committed the GLU to be a part of the Federation, not realizing that that action, persons were attempting to take away the job from me as General Secretary. And so the injunctions were filed. Robert Corbin, he was then a leader. He was then a leader. Leader. And the case was represented by Basil Williams. And the strange thing about all of that, their first presentation was that they asked the judge that I should be relieved from office until the matter is completed. And the judge said no. And that the first time I've seen Ashton behaving abnormal by shouting and making this and gesticulating, and he said, this can't happen. And by the time we leave the courthouse, the courtroom, Ashton said, you see what them boys want? They want your head. And he fought that case. And in the final analysis, Corbin had to pay a fine of $25,000 to me, which he never paid any. There are many more. She's with me already. Right. And on many occasions, I went to Ashton and he advised me. And the last but not least, filed an injunction against me, had me locked up. I had to get $1 million bail. But there again, I think it is Kale who said you don't have lawyers do pro bono. There's one there, my good friend. He fought the case pro bono. Yes. And we won again. Yeah? No, we didn't collect anything. It's pro bono, we won it. And behind the background, every other day or 2 days I will go into Ashton, we will talk. And he said the boy is good, he's doing a very good job. In case he has difficulty, he will come to me. And that is what happened. So Ashton, it's unfortunate that you had to go so early. I am one of those who believe that you'd have made 100. But nevertheless, you have lived a life, you have served the people well, and therefore your living has not been in vain. Thank you.
I think these stands are having a lot of trouble because they're not used to coming down so low. So they're off balance, they get off balance. Can I then ask, thank you, Carville. for your own experience. Can we now ask Sipol Narain from the Guyana Agricultural Workers, General Workers Union, and also a member of the FITO, which Carvel spoke about as well.
Madam Chair, Excellency President Ali, Vice President, Prime Minister, ministers, comrades, and friends, Ashton is a man you could have talked so much about. I decided to write a few things. Comrades, we are gathered here to celebrate and honor the remarkable life and extraordinary contributions of Comrade Ashton Chase, a true visionary and dedicated servant of Guyana. Ashton Chase was not just a name, he was a force that helped to transform the socio-political landscape of this country. His unwavering commitment to justice, equality, and progress left an indelible mark on the hearts and minds of Guyanese people. On the passing of Comrade Chase, in a statement by GAU, we said, quote, Comrade Ashton Chase was a remarkable figure who dedicated his life to championing the rights and welfare of workers in Guyana. As a committed Guyanese, he tirelessly advocated for fair treatment, improved working conditions, and better opportunities for all. He was a beacon of hope for workers who were cheated by their employers. Comrade Chase's unwavering determination and passion were an inspiration to his fellow colleagues and the wider community. His advocacy efforts, awareness about the challenges faced by workers, and in seeking justice and equity for them. Beyond his activism, Comrade Ashton Chase was known for his warmth, compassion, and dedication to uplifting others. He selflessly supported his colleagues, offering guidance and assistance whenever needed. On numerous occasions, he stood in the courts with GAU to secure victories for workers. End of quote. Comrade Ashton Chase was a man of intense integrity, compassion, and resilience, born and raised in Guyana. He understood the struggles faced by his fellow citizens and dedicated his life to bringing about positive change. From an early age, he recognized the power of education to uplift individuals and communities. His relentless pursuit of knowledge led him to become a lawyer, where he fought tirelessly for the rights of the marginalized and disenfranchised. Though being a lawyer, his trade union touch was never lost. He had worked alongside the father of trade unionism in Guyana, Comrade Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow, as the Assistant General Secretary of the British Guyana Labour Union. Mr. Chase also had close contacts with waterfront workers, employees of Transport and Harbors Department, Rice Marketing Board, Government Employees Union, Sawmill Workers Union, among others. Comrade Chase, up to the time of his demise, was the honorary president of NACI. His unwavering belief in the principles of justice and equity propelled him into the political arena, where he became a prominent figure in Guyana's politics. His eloquence, sharp intellect, and ability to connect with people from all walks of life made him a beloved leader. Comrade Chase was a strong advocate for a united Guyana, where diversity would be celebrated and cherished. His leadership and advocacy were not limited to his role in politics. Comrade Chase played a pivotal role in the development of Guyana's legal system, working to ensure that the rule of law prevailed and that justice was accessible to all. He championed legal reforms aimed at protecting the rights of the most vulnerable,
and his efforts led to a significant improvement in the judicial system. His name is associated with many landmark labor cases and arbitration tribunals, championing the interests of workers. Beyond his legal and political achievements, Comrade Chase was also deeply committed to education and the empowerment of young people. He recognized that education was the key to breaking the cycle of poverty and inequality. As such, he assisted with scholarships and educational programs to support promising students who lack the financial means to pursue their dreams. His generosity and dedication to nurturing the next generation of leaders will forever be remembered. But it is not just the accolades and the accomplishment that define Comrade Chase's impact. It is the lives he touched, the workers he empowered, and the hope he installed in the hearts of the downtrodden. His tireless effort paved the way for a fairer, more just society where the rights of workers are safeguarded and their contributions celebrated. Comrade Chase's contribution to Guyana extend far beyond his lifetime. His legacy will continue to inspire generations to come. His unwavering belief in the power of justice, education, and unity will forever guide our path towards a better future. Today, as we pay tribute to this icon, let us recommit ourselves to the value he held dear, and let us carry his vision forward as we strive to build a stronger, more prosperous, and inclusive Guyana. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I believe that there's a representative of the Bar Association, Kamal. Kamal, are you here? Ram Karan? Huh? Can you hear me? I'm asking for Kamal to come forward. Huh? Oh, he's coming forward. Okay. Yeah, thank you. We'd like to invite Kamal on behalf of the Guyana Bar Association to make his presentation on this idea of dealing with an Ashton Chase. No, it's okay. All right.
I know that there are no long speeches. Mr. Chase lived a very, very long life. So, Ashton Chase lived a long life from July 1926 to July 2023, and he spent most of that life fighting for justice for the ordinary working class Guyanese, whether in politics or in law. That fight was almost always against big companies. He worked tirelessly to help them paddle their little cases through the justice system against the tide of big business and government interests at a time when courts favored the colonial government or paramountcy of the party. He did this with great energy, skill, and charisma from 1957 to just before COVID, when he stopped going to court every day. It occurred to me just how long this was. You can look at numbers 1957, 2008, and have been close for a long time. So I thought about that. My grandfather met Ashton Chase when they were both in their 20s in the 1940s. They knew each other, they worked together in the PPP. They joined, Ashton formed the PAC. My grandfather would have joined in 1947. And they were close to the rest of Boise's life. Now, Boise died over 30 years ago from old age. Ashton continued on. And they were only 7 years apart. There's only 7 years difference in them. My father, Ralph, went to Gray's Inn in England to study because Ashton Chase had gone to Gray's Inn, and he qualified in 1973, joined Ashton as a junior lawyer in the political cases, which were many, and were done by B.O. Adams, Do Not Sing, and Ashton Chase during that period. And so they continued along. I became a lawyer about 20 years ago, and I worked with and against Ashton Chase during that 20-year period. He continued on with great steadfastness. So that's how long he's been fighting for justice for the working man. One steadfast chase versus 3 generations of Ramparans. So in the year when he was 90, I did my last trial against him. He was 89, but he became 90 that overtime payments. He was always at court before me. I would go to court. He knew every page of every piece of paperwork, knew it all off the top of his head. He used to jump out of his seat to object. This 89-year-old man would jump out of his seat to object, and he cross-examined with great energy and great charisma. And during the case, I was trying to get a nice photograph of him instead of concentrating on my case because I was so in awe of this legend that I'm doing a case against him. So I'm opposite him on the bar table trying to sneak photos of him without him knowing. I did get a nice one, which I put up on Facebook, and I will give Pauline a copy of it. Um, so this fight he has been fighting, he's been doing it since he was in his 20s. In 1953, when Mr. Chase was Minister of Labor at the age of 28, one of the focal points of the PPP government and of the Minister of Labor was to pass the Labor Amendment Bill to allow workers to choose a trade union of their choice. At the time, the sugar workers were represented by the MPCA, which was in the pockets of the British, not interested in the interests of the sugar workers. And this thing was such a huge controversy that it was one of the reasons that the British suspended the Constitution after 133 days in government and threw the democratically elected government out of office. That act was not passed until 1997 when the PPP came back to power in independent Guyana. So that is how long it took. And that is how long the PPP was focused on that legislation to allow people to choose a trade union to represent them, a trade union of their own choice. And now it is in force and working. And as I said earlier, Ashton Chase was involved in every single PPP case from the 1960s until probably the late 2010s when the last big election case was Esther Pereira. And he was active in Gao and Nasi cases until he stopped going to court, fighting for the working man. Some of those cases created important principles of law, like Shanks and Continental Biscuit Company from 1977, where a man who gave away some broken biscuits, he used to call them scrap biscuits, he gave them away to somebody who was in need of them, and he was dismissed without any benefits. And Mr. Chase fought for him and won, and that case is now one of the leading cases on wrongful dismissal in Guyana. Another important case was Gaisuko against Timal. Mr. Timal was a sugar worker. This is a 1983 case. Mr. Timal was a sugar worker. And the sugar company changed his terms of employment, his payment, without his agreement. They reduced his salary, and he took them to court and said, you can't do that without my union had entered into something with the company to do some wickedness. The government then tried so that they could change the terms of the employment contracts, and they brought another case. This one was Muhammad Ali, not Muhammad Irfan Ali, Muhammad Ali and the Attorney General, 1989 case, where the court agreed with Mr. Chase, the Court of Appeal, and said that the union had to be consulted before the law could be changed, and they nullified the law. So these are very, very important cases that Mr. Chase has contributed over the course of his career to the jurisprudence of Guyana. He spent his life fighting for the rule of law and democracy. He did this as a politician, as a lawyer, and as president of the Bar Association, where he served for many years. He also he contributed to legal education in the Caribbean as chairman of the Council of Legal Education, and he helped to bring subsidized legal services to the people of Guyana in his integral role in the founding and development of the Georgetown Legal Aid Clinic. Mr. Chase was a true Guyanese hero and an enduring treasure to the PPP. The PPP song is "Oh Fighting Men." For many years, since I was a little child, I always wondered, who are these fighting men and what are they fighting about? Now, when I thought about Mr. Chase, I think that Mr. Chase personifies that song. Mr. Chase is the PPP's fighting man, and for generations to come, he should be remembered by people who he has helped, by people who look at the history of Guyana, to know that this was a man who fought for the Guyanese people and endured over many years in doing so. I was going to write a letter to the Stabbock News about something about Mr. Chase, but as important people are here, I think I will raise it here. There are two airports in Guyana. One is named after the great Cde Ashton. The other one is Eugene Correa International Airport. Now, all of these things, these great things Chase did, Eugene Correa, when the PPP government was thrown out in 1953, the British picked Eugene Correa as one of the people to put into parliament from 1953 to 1957. Another thing he was famous for was Black Friday in, I think it's February 16, 1962, going out and destroying Georgetown at the behest of the British and the Americans, the CIA and so on. So on the one hand, you have the great Cde Ashton and the airport named after him. On the other hand, you have Eugene Correa. When you have such great people in this country, like Ashton Chase, I leave those decisions with all of the important people who are in this room who will understand where I'm coming from. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kamal. I knew Kamal when he was a little boy running around. So we also go through the generations again. The turn of Ralph, the turn of Ashton Chase, the turn of all of us who have been around for quite a while. But all the time, everyone speaks about his patriot, person who was totally dedicated and loved his land, his people, and fought for justice and never wavered. It's easy sometimes to give up and to step back, but he never did. And he kept on standing up for justice, for human rights, for democracy and equality. And this is a sign of a true patriot of Guyana. One of the things in the groups that began both the PAC and the PPP were these young people, as I mentioned earlier, that had this vision of a Guyana that would be different. And what is amazing that in the 40s and the 50s, the whole view of poverty was very stark in Guyana. The class differences were very sharp. The ethnic differences between what was the white rulers and those who were not white. And that whole philosophy of fighting for justice, for equality, the right to vote at free and fair elections, to have every man and woman have the right to vote, these were fundamental principles that our people fought for. And people that were in the leadership of the People's Progressive Party and in the Political Affairs Committee. These are persons that were visionaries, were brave, were strong, and were principled, and realized that they were opening new vistas for our country, new doors for the people of our country, new thinking in terms of having leaders. And I remember meeting years ago an elderly gentleman in the 70s when I came back home. And I used to stand on the road in Mandela, South Rhine Belt, waiting for a car to come out. In those days, you didn't have taxis and minibuses like you have now. And so this gentleman would come out from the back of South Rhine Belt. Sometimes he would see me waiting for a long time for some kind of car to get to Freedom House where I worked. And one day he stopped and picked me up and he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "Freedom House." And he said, "Okay." And he brought me here and he said, he said that he was younger in the 50s. And what always amazed him was that how he heard Cde Ashton and these young leaders, Ashton and so on, speak about the colonials. And this was something that he felt was quite radical and revolutionary in those days. He said when Jagan and them got up and made fun of the British colonial, that they weren't infallible, that you could criticize them and live to see another day. And so the whole concept of someone telling me in the 70s what he remembered of the 1950s under colonialism. These struggles mean something to who we are as Guyanese. They define us as Guyanese. And whether one goes out and votes for the PPP or decides you want to vote for someone else, the history of the PPP is also the history of Guyana. You can't split the two. They're inextricably woven together. And the lives of Ashton Chase and Chetty and Janet and many others, Brinley Ben and others, were part of the fabric that created this history of our country that we should be very proud of. And that is one of the issues I'd like to ask people talking about writing. Gopal gave a wonderful history, but Ashton wrote a lot, but no one wrote about Ashton. So Ashton wrote a lot. And when I was in university, books on Guyana were very, very few. And one of the first books I got to read on my country was the history of trade unionism in Guyana. That's the first time I heard of Mr. Chase. And the other book, of course, was West on Trial. And later on was Dr. Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And those are my three textbooks. That's all I had in university on Guyana, and this was abroad. So that I'm saying to people like Gopal and all of you here that we need to write and record our history because our children and their children need to know from whence we came. How did we get to where we got to? How have we been able to build a nation and continue to build a nation over and over in our halting way, in our struggles, but we're able to do it. And so we should be proud. And the other thing too is, of course, then Kamal made a proposal in bailed, but I think it was a correct proposal that we name places after many of our heroes. I remember when we did the stadium down the East Bank, and there was a whole letter writing that people said, name it after Chetty Jagan, name it after so-and-so, name it after so-and-so. And it became a political football. Oh, if you name it after Chetty Jagan, this is all the usual nonsense in the press. And if we name it someone else. And so the peaceful approach, the Band-Aid approach, and sometimes the correct political approach is to call it the National Stadium of Guyana. And so that's kind of remained. But there are opportunities, but every time sometimes we try to name, sometimes there's a political flashback. And let's hope we're growing more and more mature, and that will not, we'll be able to reduce that and prevent that, because we need to name many places after our heroes. And so I would like to ask some other persons in the room to come forward. Can I ask Clement Rohi, former General Secretary of the party, member right now of GCOM, and fighter in his own rights in those old days that some of us came from. Don't look at me like that.
I don't have to Kimmel, so I'm not thinking. Good evening, everyone. I feel very honored and privileged to be speaking on this occasion. I feel a personal attachment to it for a number of reasons. First and foremost, because I got to know Clement Ashton who had his chambers on South Road. And I was given the task Comrade Ashton, who had his chambers on South Road, and the executive committee of the party. I think that what struck me with this comrade, and that is how I got to know him, and that is how I got to respect him, because whenever I went to that chambers to deliver something to him, he would always have someone in his office. Of course, I had to wait. But he himself would come out to meet me, greet me, talk to me for a very brief moment, and then whatever had to be done was done. But what struck me with Comrade Ashton was this. I think Comrade Barrett made that point in his initial presentation, that you don't have to be in the leadership of the PPP. You don't have to be a political activist of the PPP. You don't have to be a card-bearing member of the PPP to make a contribution to the struggle of the people of this country, whether it is struggle for democracy or whatever the case is. And we find that that is what is happening now. That the People's Progressive Party has opened up its arms to such an extent that it has welcomed people who I hardly know, having been in this party for so many years. But it is a healthy and welcoming sign, because it reminds me, those of us who know the history of this party, we having that today, where the People's Progressive Party is actually retracing its footsteps back to that period when it was the national party that represented all classes and social strata in this country. And that is something I personally feel proud of. But speaking about Comrade Ashton, is what I like to say is this. In the legal field and in the political field, without even being an executive or a member of the Central Committee of the party. And that, I believe, little booklet. I didn't read the entire history of trade unionism in Guyana, because I'm not a trade unionist. To what the party just struck me, and I hope it struck others in the audience. When you read this little booklet here written by Ashton, when the party was in government for 133 education, health, local government, transportation. It's all written down here. What the PPP experienced, not only in terms of challenges, but also in terms of successes. if you all government beginning from 92 throughout to now, without the interruption, as I call it, an interruption that took place in 2050. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it happened. If you look at the programs and policies that the PPP was pursuing, as written by Ashton in this book, it's basically the same policies, of course, in a different context, with modifications, with new ideas, but the trust and the direction is basically the same. And what is the trust and direction? To alleviate the living and working conditions of the working people of this country. What is the housing program of this government aimed at doing? What is the agricultural policies that this government aims at doing? If you read this book, this little booklet carefully, you will find that is basically meaning not his personal and private history. I mean his historical contribution to the political evolution in Guyana, legal and labor. What we find is that his historical contribution is part and parcel of Guyana's evolution in each of those areas. So he made his own history by virtue of his own contribution. And his own contribution was not for personal self-aggrandizement. His contribution was basically to helping people, Again, we come back to the basic philosophical underpinnings of the PPP today, as it has always been, which has been to help people, common people. When I look at some of the people that come to Freedom House today to meet with the General Secretary, I don't see the people who really come to meet the President because he's another place. But when I look at the people who come to meet the General Secretary of this party, these are common, ordinary people. These are people who can be working somewhere, what you call vendors, struggling for a living. And they all have needs, we all have needs, and these people have specific needs. So they feel that it is a need for them to turn to a party that can help them. And there's absolutely no doubt of the fact that the party has been helping. As we have seen through the prism of what Ashton Chase O.E. And that is the reason in the ministries, there were no files, there were no records. These files and these records were in the Colonial Secretary's office in the Parliament buildings. So when a minister wanted documents, wanted files to understand what was happening, let's say, in the agriculture sector, in the transport sector. They had to go to the Colonial Secretary's Office at Parliament Building to collect the files. And Ashton also pointed out that there were even difficulties, for example, in interministerial communication. Sometimes he said that letters took 2-3 days to move from one minister to the next. And that was precisely because of the type of bureaucracy that was set up by the colonial law. Taken a week now. That's a matter for the other day. But let's talk quickly about legacy. There are two aspects of this legacy of Ashton Chase that I'd like to speak to. One is continuity. Continuity. Because through the annals of history, beginning from 47, 53, the 60s, and every electoral scenario, we see the element of continuity. And that element of continuity has extended itself even up to today. And I repeat again in terms of the programs and policies. Yes, Gail, I see you moving in this. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed an honor for me to be afforded an opportunity to speak. Chase lived a long life, 96 years. Total aggregate was absolutely astonishing. Beginning as a teenager, what mental makeup would a teenager have in the 40s to decide to take on the mighty colonial empire, the mighty plantocracy, the social establishment at that time? You had to have a special presence of mind, an acuity of vision being appeared in every major political case, every major political case, involving the elections petition with Esther Pereira when they attempted to block the swearing in of President Janet Jackson. The case was filed by Aubrey Norton. It was Ashton again representing GCOM. He appeared in every case with GCOM. He wrote many important books that will continue to guide the legal profession and the trade unions in Guyana. He was president and executive member of the Guyana Bar Association for many years. At a time, he was one of the day in the height of political dictatorship. He did not have money to pay the subscription to make the Guyana Bar Association a member of the International Bar Association because there was a ban on foreign exchange. Ashton found ways and means of getting friends all over the world to pay the subscription so that the Guyana Bar Association could have been part of the International Bar Association. He started the first legal aid clinic in Guyana in the 80s, and he continued in the late 70s and continued until the 90s. There is so much that one can say about the life and contribution of Ashton Chase. But Pauline is here to continue that rich legacy, and we are all lucky and fortunate to be part and parcel of Ashton's life. And I was privileged to appear with him in many of the cases in his later life. When I entered the profession about 2 decades ago, he was already in his 70s. Most human beings would have been eclipsing at that time, ending their professional life, not Ashton. He continued for 20-something years after that. So thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you very much, Comandante. My Comrade Roy was brought to my attention an important issue. Ashton could have been president of this country in 1970. Remember, we were brought after independence. lost in the vote because we didn't have majority in 1970. But he could have been president of our country in those early days. And maybe if that had happened, our country would not have gone through the long, hard struggles of the 70s, 80s to restore democracy and to build back our nation. Tonight, before I call on Pauline, to just say to the family of Ashton Chase, it was for all of us a privilege to have known him, a privilege to have seen different facets of his personality and his contributions to our country. We have all stood on the shoulders of those who came before us. And I want to say, as a Guyanese and all of us, we have so much to be proud of as a nation. And when you read the newspapers and the social media, you sometimes think, is this my country? Is this what's going on? But when you read about the lives of beautiful people like Ashton Chase, with a beautiful mind and a beautiful soul that contributed his entire life to the development of his country, to the forward movement of our country, for justice, for human rights, for democracy. And so these are the men whose shoulders we stand on. And shouldn't we, as this generation, the next generations, honor them, celebrate them, but just don't go through it in a night of reflection or at a funeral, but to live by those principles of justice, of human rights, of equality, and of patriotism, to love our country. And as they say, maybe some of us a navel string buried deeper than others, but we love our nation and we want to see our country continue to grow, to continue, because this is what people sacrifice their lives for. I'm sure with the brilliant mind that Ashton had, if he'd went abroad, he would have been a very expensive lawyer in the courts of United States or United Kingdom, chose not to, chose to live here and to dedicate his entire life. And so tonight is an honor for us as Guyanese, as those of us who are PPP, those of us who are friends of the PPP, those who are supporters of the PPP, and those who are not. This is a special night for us to recognize the role and the contribution of an outstanding man called Ashton Chase, who gave his energies and best qualities to justice and to the benefit of our nation. And so, in closing, we would like to say to the family, thank you. And to say to Pauline, would you like to come and just close? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Comrades, standing on protocols, it is always a pleasure to be with you. We are family. Forgive me if I wish it were under any other circumstances than they are right now to be with you. This party was my father's life, and through you, it is his legacy. And he loved this party as he loved his children. And I say that because those of you who know him, he was not an intrusive person. And he fathered us that way. He never imposed his will on us. He never told us what to do. It was just a simple act of, you know what is expected, and it's for you to figure out if you follow it or not. And that is how he fathered us, never imposing his will, but always knowing that he is there if you need guidance, if you need help in any way. Now, to many people, he would be many things: friend, colleague, foe. God help you if he was your foe. As we've learned, he's very tenacious, underlying that very simple and calm exterior. But to us, he was our father. And we could not, my brother Ronald and my sister Sarita, we could not have acted for a better father. And we never felt, and he was a very simple man. He did not like a lot of fuss. I've heard people being chastised if they made too much of him. So tonight he would probably say, "Oh dear," and he would, give his usual nod and smile. But he was a and it never left him. And he never liked excess. He was always very frugal. And very simple. I can tell you, I can give you one example. He made decisions on his principles, and the chips fell where they be, whatever that would be. So later on in life, he decided he wasn't traveling anymore. He went everywhere he needed to go, and it was really a decision that came about after you had to start fingerprinting and taking your eye. He says, "I'm not a criminal, and I'm not going to be treated that way in anybody else's country." And he stopped traveling, and we wanted him to go somewhere. And I was pleading with him, and I was begging with him. He says, "My darling, the decision has been made, and there's nothing I can do about it." Someone fell? It's okay, it's a chair? Okay. Yes. And he says, "My darling, the decision has been made, and there's nothing I can do about it." And I asked him, I said, it sounded as though it went to Parliament and this was something that he could not change and was extrinsic to him, but that was just who he was. And on behalf of the family, we really wish to thank you all for this evening. I didn't know coming how I'd be able to get through it, but as I said, we're family, and your support and your love, and we can feel it all around us. And it has really, really been very, very comforting to the family tonight. And we thank the General Secretary and the members of the party for doing this evening. And we really do thank you. And for my mother, it was her husband. They were married, they were together for almost 50 years. So I ask that you keep her in your prayers and you keep her close, because she really did have the best man. Sorry, Anna, I know you think you are, but but it was really Ashton. And I think you would agree on that. You can see it perfect. So thank you all so very much. I know you've taken so much time already to be here. I don't want to keep you further. And I do hope I get to see and interact with you. You stay around after. So thank you all very much. Thank you again to the General Secretary, Minister Teixeira, Prime Minister, everyone, Central and Executive Committee, and all the party members. Thank you all so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline, so much. And thank you, everyone who has attended this evening. For those, again, we repeat, for those who've never come to Freedom House, welcome. And I hope this will not be your first time or your only time. For those who know Freedom House, this is your home. This is our home in the PPP, and we welcome you. And tonight we hope that we achieve something in terms of paying homage to a really great man of Guyana, a great, brilliant brain, a beautiful soul, as I said. But more than that, for people to come away from a little bit of history, a little bit of understanding about our country and the contributions of people, particularly Ashton Chase. I believe that, Maureen, is there some light refreshment at the back? Yes. So we will ask you now to thank you very much. And you're welcome to stay. There is light refreshment, underlining the word light. But we welcome you to stay, relax, and thank you very much. Let us hope we can meet on more happy.